Eliza Hayes clutched her bouquet of wildflowers so tightly that her knuckles turned white, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror of the Humboldt, Nevada boarding house. The wedding dress that had taken her months to sew strained at the seams, a reminder of why Randall Porter had abandoned her just hours before they were to be joined in holy matrimony. The note he'd left was cruel in its simplicity. "I can't marry a woman who'll crush me in my sleep." It was 1876, and the frontier town of Humboldt had never seen such scandal. Folks had been whispering about her size for years, but Eliza had believed Randall when he said he loved her just as she was. She'd been a fool. A gentle knock interrupted her tears. "Miss Hayes." "The guests are still waiting at the church. Reverend Williams sent me to check on you." Eliza recognized the deep, gentle voice of Xavier Lawson, the preacher's younger brother. She couldn't face him, couldn't face anyone. "Tell them to go home," she called through the door, her voice breaking. "There won't be a wedding today." The door creaked open anyway, and Xavier stepped inside, his tall frame filling the modest doorway. Unlike his stern brother, Xavier had kind eyes that crinkled at the corners and a face weathered by years working outdoors. "I heard about Porter," he said simply. "The whole town's talking." Eliza turned away, shame burning her cheeks. "Then you know I've been made a spectacle. Again." Xavier took off his hat, revealing thick brown hair streaked with early gray. At 32, he was 7 years her senior and had never married, dedicating himself instead to the family ranch while his brother tended to spiritual matters. "What Porter did was cowardly," Xavier said, "and cruel." "But not surprising," Eliza whispered. "Look at me." Xavier really looked at the woman before him. Her auburn hair was pinned elegantly beneath the simple veil. Her eyes, though red from crying, were the color of summer sage. And yes, she was a large woman, but her hands were skilled enough to fashion the most beautiful quilts in the territory, and her laugh, when she allowed it, could warm the coldest winter night. "I see a woman who deserves better than Randall Porter," he said firmly. "And I also see 50 people in their Sunday best, a cake Mrs. Holloway spent 3 days baking, and my brother standing at the pulpit wondering what to do." Eliza shook her head. "I can't go there. I can't face them all knowing what? That Porter's a fool." Xavier stepped closer. "Miss Hayes, Eliza, I have a proposition." She looked up, confused. "I'll stand with you," he said simply. "Today, at the altar." Eliza stared at him in disbelief. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life." His voice was steady. "I won't have you shamed in front of the whole town. Not when he stopped himself. "When you what?" Eliza whispered. Xavier looked down at his hat, turning it in his hands. "When I've admired you from afar for years. Your kindness. Your strength. The way you've raised your younger brothers and sisters after your parents passed." Eliza couldn't believe what she was hearing. Xavier Lawson, the most respected rancher in the county, had noticed her. "This isn't charity," he continued. "But I won't pretend it's a love match either, not yet. I'm offering a partnership, a chance to face the town together instead of alone, and perhaps in time." His words hung in the air between them, full of possibility. "Why would you do this for me?" Eliza asked. "Because no one deserves to be abandoned on their wedding day. And because I believe we could build something real together." He extended his hand. "What do you say, Miss Hayes? Will you let me stand with you?" The question lingered in the small room, heavy with the weight of decision. Outside, the distant murmur of townsfolk waiting for news floated through the window. Time was running out. Eliza looked at Xavier's outstretched hand. This wasn't how she'd imagined her wedding day, but there was something in Xavier's eyes, a steadfastness, a promise that made her reach out and place her hand in his. "Yes," she said softly. "I will." The church fell silent when Eliza entered on Xavier's arm. She could feel every eye upon her, hear the whispers begin. But Xavier stood tall beside her, guiding her down the aisle with gentle confidence. Reverend Jonathan Lawson's expression was a mixture of confusion and concern as they approached the altar. He leaned forward to whisper harshly to his brother. "What are you doing, Xavier?" "The right thing," Xavier replied firmly. "Will you marry us, Jonathan?" The Reverend glanced from his brother to Eliza, then to the congregation watching with rapt attention. Finally, he nodded. "If you're certain." "I am," Xavier said and turned to Eliza. "Are you, in that moment, facing the possibility of a new beginning rather than shameful defeat?" Eliza found her voice. "I am." The ceremony was brief, the words traditional. When the time came to kiss his bride, Xavier leaned down and placed the gentlest of kisses on Eliza's lips, respectful, but with a warmth that surprised her. As they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, Eliza caught sight of several expressions: shock, confusion, and from Mrs. Porter, Randall's mother, undisguised disdain. But then something unexpected happened. Ruth Holloway, the baker, stood up and began to clap. Slowly, others joined in until the small church resonated with applause. "Ready to face them all?" Xavier asked quietly, offering his arm once more. Eliza took a deep breath and nodded. Together. The wedding reception was a subdued affair at first. Though Xavier had convinced most of the town to attend the ceremony out of respect, the circumstances of their sudden union hung in the air like smoke. Xavier's ranch foreman, Miguel Vasquez, approached them first, shaking Xavier's hand vigorously. "Boss, you've surprised us all today, but I've never known you to make a rash decision. So I say felicidades." "Thank you, Miguel," Xavier replied, genuinely grateful for his foreman's support. Others came to offer congratulations, some sincere, others clearly curious about the scandal. Through it all, Xavier remained by Eliza's side, his hand occasionally finding the small of her back in a gesture of reassurance. When Mrs. Porter approached, her thin lips pressed into a disapproving line, Xavier tensed. "Well," she said, looking Eliza up and down, "I suppose you've landed on your feet after all, though I can't imagine what Mr. Lawson is thinking, taking my son's leavings." Eliza felt herself shrink under the woman's cruel words, but Xavier stepped forward. "Mrs. Porter," he said, his voice low but carrying, "your son left a woman of character and substance at the altar today. I consider myself fortunate that his poor judgment has become my good fortune. Now, if you'll excuse us, my wife and I are greeting our guests." Mrs. Porter's mouth opened in shock, but Xavier had already turned away, guiding Eliza toward Ruth Holloway, who was serving the wedding cake with a determined smile. "You didn't have to do that," Eliza whispered. "Yes, I did," Xavier replied, "and I'll do it as many times as necessary." By the time they left the church hall, the sun was setting over the Nevada desert, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Xavier helped Eliza into his wagon, careful and attentive. "Where are we going?" she asked, suddenly realizing she hadn't considered what would happen after the ceremony. "Home," Xavier said simply. "To the ranch, unless you'd prefer to stay in town tonight." The thought of spending their wedding night in the boarding house, where everyone would be whispering about them, made Eliza shudder. "The ranch is fine." They rode in silence for several miles, the only sound the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves and the creak of the wagon wheels. The Lawson Ranch lay 5 miles outside of town, nestled against the foothills with a clear view of the mountains beyond. As they approached, Eliza could make out the substantial main house, a barn, and several outbuildings. A dog began barking, running out to meet them. "That's Rusty," Xavier said. "He's friendly, just loud." Eliza nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of her situation. She was married to a man she barely knew, headed to his home, on what should have been her wedding night with another. Xavier seemed to sense her apprehension. As he stopped the wagon in front of the house, he turned to her. "Eliza, I want you to know something. I meant what I said in town. This isn't charity, but I also understand that this isn't what you planned. So tonight, and for as long as you need, you'll have your own room. I won't rush you into anything." Relief and something like disappointment mingled in Eliza's chest. "Thank you," she managed. Xavier jumped down from the wagon and came around to help her down. His hands were strong and sure on her waist, and for a moment they stood close together in the gathering darkness. "Welcome home, Mrs. Lawson," he said softly. The house was larger than it had appeared from a distance, with a spacious main room featuring a stone fireplace, solid wooden furniture, and shelves lined with books, more books than Eliza had seen outside of a schoolroom. "You raid?" she asked, surprised. Xavier smiled. "Every chance I get. My mother was a schoolteacher before she married my father. She believed education shouldn't stop just because you work with your hands." He showed her through the house, the kitchen with its large cookstove, the dining room with a table that could seat 10, and upstairs, 4 bedrooms, including the master bedroom at the end of the hall. "This one will be yours," he said, opening the door to a pleasant room with a large bed, a dresser, and a washstand. "I'm across the hall if you need anything." Eliza nodded, taking in the room that was now hers. "It's lovely. I'll bring your trunk up once Miguel delivers it from town tomorrow," Xavier said. "But for tonight, I think my mother's nightdress might fit you." He crossed to a chest at the foot of the bed and pulled out a simple white cotton nightgown. She was a substantial woman too, strong like you. The simple acknowledgement of her size without judgment made Eliza's eyes fill with tears. Xavier noticed and immediately looked concerned. "I've upset you. I'm sorry." Eliza shook her head. "No, it's just, Randall never wanted to acknowledge how I looked." As if ignoring it would make me different. Xavier's expression softened. "Eliza, I saw you, all of you, when I asked you to marry me. I don't need you to be different." The tears spilled over then, and Eliza turned away, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. It's been a long day, of course." Xavier stepped back toward the door. "I'll let you rest. There's water in the pitcher for washing and extra blankets in the chest if you get cold." He hesitated at the door. "Good night, Eliza. Good night, Xavier." It was the first time she had spoken his given name, and it hung in the air between them like a tentative bridge across an unknown chasm. After he left, Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her wedding dress, trying to make sense of the day's events. Just this morning, she had been preparing to marry Randall Porter, the shopkeeper's son she'd known since childhood. Now, she was Mrs. Xavier Lawson, wife of a rancher she'd exchanged no more than polite greetings with before today. She changed into the nightgown Xavier had provided, grateful to be free of the constricting wedding dress. The cotton was soft against her skin, and though the sleeves were a bit short, it fit her well enough. His mother must have been built like her indeed. Sleep was elusive that night. Eliza lay awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the occasional whinny of horses in the barn, the wind whistling around the eaves of the house. She wondered what Xavier was thinking across the hall. Was he regretting his impulsive offer? Was he lying awake too? Morning came too quickly. Eliza dressed in her wedding gown again, lacking any other clothes, and made her way downstairs to find Xavier already at the stove, frying bacon and eggs. He turned when he heard her, a smile warming his features. "Good morning. I hope you slept well." "Well enough," she replied, self-conscious in her formal attire. I'm sorry I don't have anything else to wear. Xavier nodded, understanding. Miguel should be here with your things before noon. In the meantime, perhaps one of my mother's old dresses might serve. They're in the trunk in your room. Thank you, Eliza said, grateful for his thoughtfulness. And thank you for cooking. I could have done that. I'm used to fending for myself, Xavier replied, sliding eggs onto 2 plates. But I won't object if you want to take over the kitchen in the future. I've heard you're a fine cook. You've heard about me? Eliza asked, surprised. Xavier set the plates on the table and gestured for her to sit. Humboldt's a small town, and your pies at the last church social were memorable. He smiled at the memory. Especially the apple one. Eliza felt a flush of pleasure at the compliment. My mother's recipe. They ate breakfast together. The conversation stilted at first, but gradually becoming more comfortable, as Xavier told her about the ranch, the cattle operation, the small orchard behind the house, the vegetable garden that had gone somewhat wild in the absence of a woman's touch. I've been meaning to replant it, he admitted, but between the cattle and helping Jonathan with church matters, I haven't found the time. I could help with that, Eliza offered. I've always kept a garden. Xavier's smile was warm. I'd like that. After breakfast, Eliza changed into one of the dresses from the trunk, a simple blue calico that had to be taken out at the seams but would serve until her own clothes arrived. She was just pinning her hair up when she heard the sound of a wagon approaching. Looking out the window, she was surprised to see not Miguel with her trunk, but Reverend Lawson's buggy pulling up to the house. Xavier met his brother at the door. From the top of the stairs, Eliza could hear their voices, though they clearly thought they were speaking privately. Have you lost your mind completely, Xavier? Jonathan demanded. Marrying a woman you barely know just because Porter jilted her. I know what I'm doing, Jonathan. Xavier's voice was calm but firm. Do you? Because from where I stand, you've tied yourself to a woman no one else wanted, who brings nothing to this marriage but scandal and extra burden. Eliza froze, the words cutting deeply. That's enough. Xavier's voice had hardened. Eliza is my wife now, and you will respect her as such. She's a good woman who was treated shamefully, and I won't have you adding to her humiliation. I'm thinking of you, brother, Jonathan insisted. What will happen when the novelty wears off? When you realize you've bound yourself to a woman who can't even work beside you without getting winded? Who might not be able to bear children safely, Jonathan. Xavier's tone held a warning. You're my brother and you're welcome in my home, but if you can't speak respectfully about my wife, then you should leave now. There was a long pause, and then Jonathan's voice came again, softer this time. I pray you know what you're doing, Xavier. I do, Xavier replied simply. Now, was there something you needed, or did you come just to lecture me? Jonathan sighed audibly. Mother's Bible. You took it to be rebound in Carson City, and I need it for the church records. Old Mrs. Tanner is insisting on adding her new grandchild's name. I'll get it for you. Eliza retreated quickly to her room, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping, but the Reverend's words echoed painfully. An extra burden. A woman no one else wanted. Was that how everyone saw her? Was that how Xavier would come to see her too once the novelty wore off? She was sitting on the edge of the bed, fighting tears, when Xavier knocked on her door. Eliza, are you all right? I thought I heard you moving about. She quickly wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. Yes, I'm fine. I'll be down in a moment. But when she opened the door, Xavier's concerned expression told her he wasn't fooled. You heard Jonathan, didn't you? Eliza couldn't lie. Yes. Xavier's jaw tightened. I'm sorry, my brother can be traditional in his thinking. He's not wrong, though, is he? Eliza said quietly. I am a burden, a woman no one wanted. He's entirely wrong, Xavier replied firmly, and I won't have you believing otherwise. He hesitated, then added, I wanted you, Eliza. Maybe not in the conventional way that marriages usually begin, but I made my choice with clear eyes and a willing heart." The sincerity in his voice made Eliza want to believe him, but doubt, fed by years of sidelong glances and whispered comments, was not so easily dismissed. "Why?" she asked simply. "Why me, Xavier? There are plenty of unmarried women in Humboldt who would have been eager to be your wife." Xavier looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing how much to say. Finally, he spoke. "Because I've watched you for 3 years, Eliza Hayes. I've seen how you care for your siblings after your parents died, how you took in your cousin's baby when she couldn't care for him, how you make quilts for every new child born in the county, even those whose parents have been unkind to you." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "I've seen your strength and your gentleness. And yes, I've seen your size, which is just part of who you are, like my gray hair or my brother's rigid thinking." Eliza felt tears threatening again, but for entirely different reasons. "You've really been watching me all this time?" Xavier nodded. "I have, and I would have spoken sooner, but you were promised to Porter, and I respect such things." His expression darkened. "Though I respect him considerably less after yesterday." A knock at the door downstairs interrupted them. "That will be Miguel with your things," Xavier said. "Shall we continue this conversation later?" Eliza nodded, suddenly eager to change into her own clothes and begin establishing some normalcy in this strange new life. Miguel had indeed brought her trunk, along with news from town. "The Porter boy left on the morning stage," he reported as Xavier helped him carry the heavy trunk upstairs. "Headed for San Francisco, they say." "Good riddance," Xavier muttered, then glanced at Eliza apologetically. "I'm sorry, that was insensitive," but Eliza found she agreed. "No, you're right. Good riddance indeed." The rest of the day passed in a blur of domestic activity. Eliza unpacked her trunk, arranged her few possessions in the bedroom and kitchen, and began taking stock of the household supplies. Xavier showed her the property, introducing her to the ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse, 4 men who tipped their hats respectfully, and called her Mrs. Lawson, with varying degrees of curiosity in their eyes. By evening, a semblance of routine had begun to establish itself. Eliza cooked dinner using supplies from the well-stocked pantry, and they ate together at the large table, the conversation flowing more easily now. "This is delicious," Xavier said, enjoying a second helping of the chicken and dumplings Eliza had prepared. "I haven't had a home-cooked meal like this since my mother passed." "How long ago was that?" Eliza asked. 6 years this winter," Xavier replied. "Influenza. Took my father the same week. Jonathan and I have managed since then, him with the church and me with the ranch." "I'm sorry," Eliza said softly. "I lost my parents to the fever 3 years ago," Xavier nodded. "I remember. It was a hard time for many families." They shared memories of their parents over dinner, finding common ground in their experiences of loss and responsibility. Xavier spoke of his father teaching him to ride, his mother insisting he learn Shakespeare alongside ranching skills. Eliza told him about her mother's cooking lessons and her father's gift for storytelling. "Your siblings will be welcome to visit whenever they like," Xavier said as they cleared the dishes. "Your brothers might even find work here on the ranch if they're interested." "That's generous of you," Eliza said, touched by his thoughtfulness. "My youngest sister, Mary, is only 14. She's been staying with our aunt in Carson City to finish her schooling, but she'll need a home during holidays." "Then she'll come here," Xavier said simply. "This is your home now, Eliza. Your family is part of that." As they prepared for bed that second night, the awkwardness of their situation resurfaced. Xavier walked Eliza to her door, keeping a respectful distance. "Thank you for today," he said. for beginning to make this house a home again." "Thank you for giving me a home to make," she replied. They stood there for a moment, neither quite ready to part for the night. Finally, Xavier leaned forward and placed a gentle kiss on her cheek. "Good night, Eliza." "Good night, Xavier." As she closed the door, Eliza touched her cheek where his lips had been. It wasn't the passionate wedding night she had once imagined with Randall, but there was something honest and sweet in Xavier's gesture that made her heart beat a little faster. The days turned into weeks as summer settled over the Nevada landscape. Eliza found her place on the ranch more easily than she had expected. She took charge of the household, replanted the garden, and even began learning about the cattle operation from Xavier, who seemed pleased by her interest. The whispers in town gradually subsided as the initial scandal of their hasty marriage was replaced by newer gossip. When Eliza accompanied Xavier to church on Sundays, they were greeted with increasing warmth, though Reverend Lawson remained coolly polite to his new sister-in-law. One evening in late July, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Xavier broached a subject they had both been avoiding. "The county fair is next month," he said, his eyes on the distant mountains. "I usually enter some of the livestock. I was wondering if you might consider entering your quilts. They're fine work, Eliza." She hesitated. The fair meant crowds, stares, whispers. "I don't know, Xavier. People will talk." He turned to look at her directly. "People always talk. But they're beginning to see what I've always seen, a woman of value and substance." Eliza smiled at his choice of words. Xavier never shied away from acknowledging her size, but he always did so in a way that made it simply another fact about her, like the color of her hair. "I'll think about it," she promised. Xavier nodded, satisfied with that answer for now. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and stars began to appear. "Eliza," Xavier said after a while, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you." She turned to him, curious at the slight nervousness in his voice. "We've been married for nearly 6 weeks now," he continued, "and I've tried to give you the time and space I promised, but I find myself wanting more." Eliza's heart began to race. "More?" Xavier met her gaze steadily. "I would like to court my wife, if she's willing. To build the kind of marriage that begins with friendship but grows into something deeper." The sincerity in his eyes took her breath away. This wasn't a man offering charity or fulfilling an obligation. This was a man who wanted her, all of her. "I would like that too," Eliza said softly. Xavier's smile was like the sunrise. "Then may I begin by asking if you would accompany me on a picnic tomorrow? There's a spot by the creek I'd like to show you." "I would be delighted," Eliza replied, feeling a flutter of anticipation that she hadn't experienced since before Randall's betrayal. The picnic the next day marked a turning point in their relationship. Xavier took her to a secluded bend in the creek that ran through his property, where cottonwood trees provided dappled shade and wildflowers grew in profusion along the banks. "It's beautiful," Eliza breathed, taking in the peaceful scene. "My secret thinking spot," Xavier admitted, spreading a blanket on the ground. "I come here when the responsibilities of the ranch or my brother's expectations become too much. And you're sharing it with me." Eliza was touched by the gesture. Xavier helped her settle on the blanket, his hands lingering on hers. "I want to share everything with you, Eliza." They ate the lunch she had packed: fried chicken, biscuits, apple pie, and talked for hours. Xavier told her about his dreams for the ranch, his hope to expand the orchard, perhaps even build a proper schoolhouse for the children of his ranch hands and neighboring farms. Eliza spoke of her own hopes to see her siblings well established, to continue her quilting, maybe even to have children someday, though she had always feared the risks given her size. "My mother was built like you," Xavier said gently. "She bore 4 children safely." 4. Eliza was surprised. "I thought there were just you and Jonathan." A shadow crossed Xavier's face. "My sisters died young, Sarah at 3 from scarlet fever and Rebecca at birth." "I'm so sorry," Eliza said, reaching for his hand. Xavier interlaced his fingers with hers. "It was a long time ago. But I've always wished for a larger family. Children to fill the house with laughter again." The intimacy of the conversation, of their clasped hands, created a new awareness between them. When Xavier leaned closer, his intention clear in his eyes, Eliza met him halfway. Their first real kiss was gentle, questioning. The second was more certain. By the third, Eliza had moved into the circle of Xavier's arms, her heart pounding with emotions she had thought dead after Randall's rejection. "I've wanted to do that since our wedding day," Xavier confessed, his forehead resting against hers. "Why didn't you?" Eliza asked. "Because I wanted you to be sure. To know that when I kissed you, it wasn't out of duty or pity, but because I couldn't bear not to any longer." His honesty was like a balm to her wounded heart. Eliza reached up to touch his face, tracing the lines at the corners of his eyes. "I'm sure now." They returned to the house hand in hand, something fundamental having shifted between them. That night, when Xavier walked her to her bedroom door, their goodnight kiss lingered with promise. "May I call on you tomorrow night?" he asked, his voice husky. "In your room." Eliza understood what he was asking and offering, the chance to truly become husband and wife in every sense. She nodded, suddenly shy but certain. "I would like that." Sleep was elusive that night, but for entirely different reasons than before. Eliza found herself both nervous and eager for the following evening, for the chance to experience what she had only imagined with Randall. The difference was that with Xavier, she felt none of the fear that her body would disappoint. He had seen her, chosen her, wanted her as she was. The next day passed in a blur of ordinary tasks made extraordinary by anticipation. Eliza took extra care with her appearance that evening, washing her hair with rose-scented soap and putting on her best nightgown. When Xavier knocked on her door, she felt a moment of panic. But when she opened it to find him standing there, freshly shaved and smelling of soap, his eyes warm with admiration as he took in the sight of her, the panic dissolved into something sweeter. "You are beautiful, Eliza," he said simply. No one except her parents had ever called her beautiful before. The word lodged in her heart like a precious gem. Xavier closed the door behind him and took her hands in his. "We can go as slowly as you need," he assured her. "Or if you've changed your mind," Eliza silenced him with a kiss, finding courage in his consideration. "I haven't changed my mind." That night, Xavier showed her what it meant to be truly cherished. He loved her with a reverence that brought tears to her eyes, his hands and lips discovering every curve and hollow of her body with appreciation rather than reluctance. When they finally came together as husband and wife, the pleasure Eliza felt was matched only by the emotional connection that seemed to bind them together as surely as their wedding vows had done. Afterward, lying in the circle of Xavier's arms, Eliza felt a peace she had never known before. This man, this good, kind, steadfast man, had seen her when no one else did, had chosen her when another had fled, had loved her as she was, not as others thought she should be. "Xavier," she whispered into the darkness. "Yes, love." His voice was drowsy but content. "Thank you for standing with me." He tightened his arms around her. "Always, Eliza, always." From that night forward, they shared the master bedroom, their marriage becoming in truth what it had been in name only. The ranch flourished under their joint care, with Eliza bringing a woman's practical touch to complement Xavier's skilled management. She did enter her quilts in the county fair, winning a blue ribbon that Xavier proudly displayed above the mantel. When Jonathan saw how genuinely happy his brother was, his initial resistance to the marriage gradually softened, and by Christmas, he was a regular visitor to the ranch, bringing books for Eliza and engaging her in theological discussions that Xavier watched with amused pride. Eliza's siblings became frequent visitors as well. Her younger brother Simon took a job as a ranch hand, showing an aptitude for working with horses that impressed even Miguel. Her sister Mary spent school holidays with them, flourishing under Eliza's care and Xavier's quiet encouragement of her studies. Winter gave way to spring, and with the new season came news that filled the ranch house with joy. Eliza was expecting their first child. "Are you sure?" Xavier asked, his expression a mixture of delight and concern when she told him. "Dr. Matthews confirmed it," Eliza nodded, her hands resting on her stomach, which was just beginning to round more noticeably. "He says I'm healthy and strong. There's no reason to expect any problems." Xavier gathered her into his arms, his face buried in her hair. "A child," he whispered. "Our child." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and summer. Xavier was attentive to every change, insisting Eliza rest when she became tired, bringing her wild strawberries from the creek bank to satisfy her cravings, reading to her in the evenings as they sat on the porch swing he had built for her birthday. News of the coming baby spread through Humboldt, generating a wave of goodwill. Even Mrs. Porter, still frosty toward Eliza, sent a hand-knitted baby blanket with a stiffly worded note of congratulations. "I should thank Randall," Eliza remarked to Xavier as they prepared for bed one night in her 7th month. "If he hadn't run away, I would never have found you." Xavier's expression darkened momentarily. "I've often thought the same, though I can't find it in me to be grateful to the man who hurt you." He placed his hand on her rounded belly. "But I am thankful every day for the outcome." Just then, the baby kicked vigorously against his palm, making them both laugh. "Strong, like his mother," Xavier said, his eyes crinkling with that smile Eliza had come to love so dearly. "Or stubborn, like her father," Eliza countered with a grin. The baby's gender had become a friendly debate between them. Xavier was convinced they were having a son, while Eliza felt certain it was a daughter. September brought cooler temperatures and increasing anticipation as Eliza's time grew near. Xavier arranged for Mrs. Vasquez, Miguel's wife and an experienced midwife, to stay in the house for the final weeks, and he sent for Dr. Matthews to check on Eliza more frequently. "You're fussing too much," Eliza protested one evening as Xavier insisted on rubbing her swollen feet. "Women have babies every day without all this attention." "Not my wife," Xavier replied firmly. "Not carrying my child." She couldn't really argue with his devotion, nor did she want to. After years of feeling overlooked and undervalued, being the center of someone's concern was a blessing Eliza didn't take for granted. The baby came on a crisp October morning, after a labor that lasted through the night. Xavier had refused to leave her side despite tradition dictating men wait elsewhere. He held her hand through each contraction, wiped her brow, and murmured encouragement when she felt she couldn't continue. "You're the strongest person I know, Eliza Lawson," he told her as the dawn light began to filter through the bedroom windows. "You can do this." With a final, tremendous effort, Eliza brought their child into the world. The sound of a lusty cry filled the room, and Mrs. Vasquez announced with satisfaction, "A fine, healthy son, Mr. Lawson." Xavier's eyes filled with tears as he looked from the red-faced, squalling infant to his exhausted wife. "A son," he repeated, his voice choked with emotion. "Eliza, you've given me a son." The baby was placed in Eliza's arms, and as she looked down at the tiny face, a perfect blend of her features and Xavier's, she felt a love so overwhelming it brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Hello, Samuel," she whispered, using the name they had chosen if the baby was a boy, after Xavier's father. "Welcome to the world." Xavier sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Eliza and one hand gently touching his son's downy head. "He's perfect," he said in awe. "Absolutely perfect," as Mrs. Vasquez and Dr. Matthews discreetly left the new family alone. Xavier pressed a tender kiss to Eliza's temple. "I love you," he said simply, "more than I ever thought possible." Eliza looked up at the man who had stood with her when she was at her lowest, who had seen her worth when others had not, who had given her a love story she had never dared to dream of. "And I love you," she replied. "With all that I am." News of Samuel Lawson's birth spread quickly through Humboldt. Reverend Jonathan was among the first visitors, his stern face softening as Xavier placed his nephew in his arms. "He has mother's eyes," Jonathan observed, his voice unusually gentle. "And father's chin," Xavier agreed. The brothers shared a look of understanding, years of shared grief and responsibility acknowledged in that silent exchange. Then Jonathan turned to Eliza, who was watching from her chair by the fire. "You've given our family a future, sister," he said formally. "I was wrong about you, and I ask your forgiveness." Eliza smiled, peace in her heart. "There's nothing to forgive, Jonathan. We're family now." As autumn deepened into winter, the Lawson household settled into a new rhythm centered around baby Samuel. Eliza recovered her strength quickly, proving Dr. Matthews right about her natural resilience. By Christmas, the house was filled with the scent of pine boughs and cinnamon, the sound of carols around the piano Xavier had surprised Eliza with as a gift, and the unmistakable feeling of a family complete and content. Visitors came and went: Eliza's siblings, ranch hands and their families, church members, and even Randall Porter's sister, who had broken with her family's disapproval to bring a gift for the baby. "I always thought you deserved better than my brother," she confided to Eliza as they watched Xavier entertaining the children with a puppet made from an old sock. "And it seems you found it." "I did," Eliza agreed, bouncing Samuel gently in her arms. Sometimes life's greatest disappointments lead to our greatest blessings. As the new year dawned, bringing with it the promise of spring lambs, summer harvests, and all the ordinary miracles of ranch life, Eliza often found herself pausing to marvel at the turn her life had taken. One evening, as she stood on the porch watching Xavier return from the fields, Samuel sleeping peacefully in his cradle beside her, she remembered that terrible day when Randall's note had shattered her dreams. The pain of that memory had faded to a distant echo, replaced by the joy of what had followed: a true love born not from shallow attraction, but from deep respect and genuine caring. Xavier dismounted and crossed the yard with that long, easy stride she had come to know so well. When he reached the porch, he swept her into his arms for a kiss that, even after months of marriage, still made her heart race. "What was that for?" she asked, smiling up at him. Xavier tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his eyes filled with the same steadfast love she had come to rely on. "For being you," he said simply, "for making this house a home, for our son, for everything." Eliza leaned into his embrace, savoring the solid strength of him. "I never thought I would find this," she admitted. "After Randall left me at the altar, I thought no one would ever truly want me." Xavier tightened his arms around her. "Then he did us both a favor, though I'd still like to teach him manners if I ever see him again." He glanced down at Samuel, sleeping peacefully, then back to Eliza. "But mostly, I'm grateful that I was there that day, that I found the courage to speak up, and that you were brave enough to take a chance on me." "The best chance I ever took," Eliza said softly. As the sun set over the Nevada mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Xavier and Eliza Lawson stood together on their porch, their son beside them, their love a testament to the truth that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from what seem like endings. In the years that followed, the Lawson Ranch prospered, as did the family that called it home. Samuel was joined by a sister, Rebecca, named for Xavier's lost sibling, and later by twins James and John, who kept the household lively with their mischief and energy. Eliza's quilts became known throughout the territory, with orders coming from as far away as San Francisco. Xavier expanded the orchard and cattle operation, making the Lawson Ranch one of the most successful in the county. When Reverend Jonathan finally married at the age of 42 to a widow from Carson City, it was Eliza who helped plan the wedding and Xavier, who stood proudly as his brother's best man, the circle of family complete. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the day's work was done, Xavier and Eliza would sit together on the porch swing, his arm around her substantial shoulders, her head resting against him, and marvel at the journey that had brought them together. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Randall hadn't left that day?" Xavier asked once, his fingers idly playing with a strand of her hair, now streaked with silver to match his own. Eliza considered the question, then shook her head. "No. Because even if he had stayed, I would have been settling for less than I deserved. I might never have known what it was to be truly loved for exactly who I am." Xavier pressed a kiss to her temple, his voice rough with emotion. "And who you are, Eliza Lawson, is everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dreamed." In a small frontier town where appearances had once seemed all-important, they had discovered a truth worth more than gold: that love sees beyond the surface to the heart, and that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings. And as the stars appeared one by one in the vast Nevada sky, Eliza looked at the life they had built together, the home filled with love, the children sleeping safely under their roof, the man beside her who had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself, and knew with absolute certainty that she wouldn't change a single step of the journey that had brought her here. Because sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with a perfect match, but with a perfect moment of courage, the moment when someone says, "I'll stand with you," and means it with all their heart.